We're recording. Excellent. Welcome back to the late day wrap up, of which we have plenty to talk about with the weekly closures coming in for all major markets, except for the 24/7 markets like good old Bitcoin, which we will follow up on the short-term time frame analysis there too. And of course, seen as a CME closure for the weekly is happening a little bit later today. We will be discussing that as well. So with that said, I would like to wish you the best and the happiest at this end of the week. And without further ado, let's get into good old Dixie right now, as we are seeing that breakout that we spoke about earlier this week as likely to happening right in front of our very eyes. So with that in mind, there seems to be some sort of a spider on my neck. Nope, that's a hair. Nice. What's it like to live like as a fucking hairy gorilla? Well, that's me actually. Anyways, looking at the daily right here, we see a clear break above the prior range high. It's actually closing on new highs for the daily, and the weekly is going to have a chance to follow through as well. Now, I already consider this as broken as of the range, taking out that February high of 9160-ish region. And now, technically speaking, if you want to be super conservative, just want to see a closure above the 91 region right here, the same accumulation region that we have been looking at for the past 3 months now. And remember, the 3-month territory that this one's been stuck in is very much consistent with what we've seen historically for this asset when it puts in the major macro lows, of which we do see run right on over here at around 2018. We see this one over here at 2011, 2008, and 95 over here, and 90 over here. And we've done this a million goddamn times, so you're probably already familiar with those. But more importantly, we're actually seeing this happening right in front of our very eyes. So this is, again, a very long-form analysis, but very much relevant, because this will put downwards pressure on price action versus anything that trades against the US dollar, which is pretty much everything in the world. So with that said, the targeted regions for this move, based off the measure move on this accumulation region, was the 92.5 region right here, of which we've already gotten up to about almost above 92. Yeah, 92 and almost a quarter right there. So very much well around its way. And we could extend those targets over time, but I want to see that first one hit first, I suppose, and then we will follow up on it on top of that. I would be initially looking for a pullback from this region, which will provide a little bit of a reprieve for everything else that trades against the US dollar. But for now, it is trending rather aggressively, and so I would be defensive against everything else. So with that in mind, let's go over and check out traditional markets, of which I imagine there's going to be a little bit of downside pressure in the early morning hours. And what do we see right here? No, we see a bit of a bouncy bounce, which we did speak about from this morning's video. That bouncy bounce coming in all the way up to 12.6, almost hit our 12.650 target right there. And as you can see, a pretty fucking nasty rejection right now. Still following the downtrend, getting rejected right at the 55 exponential moving average as well. And I would be looking for this one to very likely come back down and maybe even test the lows of around yesterday, around 12,350 to 12,300-ish region. And this is going to set it up for a pretty nasty weekly close as well, of course. Now, with that said, while I do think that this one does have further downside over the next month, maybe 2 months, I don't necessarily look for continuation like today. So I want to be very specific with that. I do think that probably, maybe even retest the lows, but probably holds it at least for the weekly closure, and then maybe the next week or the week after that we do see further continuation. But for now, you can see that pressure down. People obviously taking a very, very good opportunity here to be sellers, and with that in mind, I would be looking a little bit more short-term down, and I imagine it's gonna be the same thing for all major US markets, of which we do see SPY right here, basically the same fucking chart, rejection at the 89 on the hourly. If we look at the daily, did hit the 55 right here on that pullback. We did say a pullback to about 3,800 was rather likely today, or sorry, not a pullback, but a bounce up to 3,800 was rather likely today. Even got more than that, but this reaction I think is very much telling, and very likely does set up for further continuation to the downside over the next coming weeks. Does it happen exactly today or tomorrow? No. Well, tomorrow is obviously not a trading day, but a little bit of sideways here, and on Friday probably a little bit of sideways and downside. And if it comes back down and tests around 3,750. I'd probably be looking for around there to kind of create a bit of a range and then set it up for the next week to come. But there is, again, the big thing here is the downside pressure. And we do see that the bearish divergence on the weekly both on the weekly for SPY futures and NASDAQ futures very much playing out now. NASDAQ having 1, 2, 3, 4 drives. SPY having about the exact same. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Not bad right there. So I would look for this to be more of a prolonged read. We do see that weekly stows coming all the way down as well. Same thing on NASDAQ. Here too, even cracking below the critical zone, which we have not done since actually December. So this is actually rather important. And we are seeing a bit of a, did we see any sort of a sell signal right here? No. Was it on the daily? Maybe. No, actually no. So fair enough. A little bit of sideways and down. Ultimately, I do think that both of these actually have lower to go. NASDAQ very likely is the one to be watching, as that is going to be setting in the tone for the rest of the market. And ultimately, I do think that this one does find its way down to about 12,000 or 12,100 over the next few weeks. Again, next few weeks, not today. So with that said, should we check out Dow Jones? Yeah, let's actually check out Dow Jones. It's actually still kind of holding up decently okay right now. See what the hourly looks like. Yep, same sort of rejection right there. So probably a little bit of sideways and down to end out the week, and then sets it up for the next week to come. And areas of interest to the downside for Dow Jones would be somewhere around low $30,000 region, about 30,250 if I had to call it right now. But give it a little bit of time, and I imagine all these are going to move kind of in unison. Moving on into gold, I think it's gold time right now. And where is my gold? I always forget where it is. There it is. Found it. So we did hit our 1690-ish target to 1680-ish target on gold. Here's the thing, though. I do think that this very likely does continue lower over time. We do have a daily death cross coming in, which is pretty much inevitable on today's closure, actually. I'm talking about the green 55 and the purple 200 right here, of which we haven't seen a death cross since when? We haven't seen a death cross on this since actually this major dump off over here in the prior accumulation zone throughout, like, I don't know, 2013 to 2020 basically, and that led price action all the way down from about 1269 all the way down to the last major low, actually, and that was quite the move. Now for gold, this is quite big. It's almost 10% move. I know that doesn't sound too much for those of you in cryptocurrency land, but in gold land, that's actually pretty damn big. And with that in mind, I would be looking for initial bounce up, probably to start next week, but very likely that bounce gets sold into. Where could the bounce, end up around? Maybe like 1730 or 1750, anywhere around there would kind of make sense. But ultimately, I do think that this one does have further south side to go, and we do see that actually, the weekly is coming into that supported area right around 1680ish region, 1690. So you're seeing targets that we had from about a month and a half to 2 months ago now getting hit, which is, well, just patience, I suppose. But I do think it's important to kind of follow up on these over a long period of time, because a lot of the time people, just don't have the patience to be looking at that high of a time frame, because it's naturally going to incorporate a lot of time spent waiting for the inevitable here. And as you can see right now, resting on the 21 exponential average, a lot more likely to bounce off this region on the first pass. What happens on the second pass, however, that's when you hold your breath. So I do think very, very likely does bounce probably to start up next week, and then game on once again maybe a little bit later next week. And do I think that there's more downside here? Very likely, yes. Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into Bitcoin now. Yeah, should we get into Bitcoin? All right, so going back into Bitcoin, I believe we left off this morning's video and we were hanging somewhere right around about 48,000 bucks, or what exactly were we hanging around? No, actually, sorry, that's completely wrong. We were hanging around about 47,500-ish region, of which a few more wicks accumulated around the 200 simple and 200 exponential average. We did say a short-term bounce off these regions was very likely. Anywhere around 48,500 to 48,000 bucks is likely, of which we're getting right now. And I do think that this one does push back very likely over the weekend. Here's the thing, though, because we do have a weekend coming up, I would be looking at this as an opportunity, because typically speaking, over the weekend, we do see that those moves are more or less fake outs on the washout moves. What do I mean by that? Well, last weekend, for example, we did see a nice push down. Or was that last weekend? Yeah, I think that was, that was last weekend, right around here. And ultimately, when the new week starts, well, what happens? Immediately back up. What I mean to say is that when you see these counter moves over the weekend, they're typically will essentially counter signals for the next week to come. And in this case, it would actually make a lot of sense if Bitcoin did put a few more wicks in around this $44,000 to $45,000 region, and then played out another short-term bounce coming into the next week. So with that in mind, we should be aware of the closure on the weekly for CMEs right here. And there's actually a couple of very interesting things going on, because obviously last week we actually did confirm a bearish engulfing dildo right here on a weekly, I should add, which that actually is not accompanied by momentum oscillators coming down, which is rather interesting. That's actually very interesting to me. Usually would expect to see something like that. Weekly RSI is not really giving us any major causes for concern either. So I'm inclined to think that this is not going to be like a major washout, but coming down to the 10 simple would certainly not be out of the question. And that is where that's actually at low $40,000 region. So I do still think that Bitcoin has a threat of a move lower anywhere, I think $45,000 is very, very likely, but maybe down to like 39,000 or 40,000 bucks as well, still in the cards, based off that secondary chart, of which I've been bringing this up and beating this horse to death a million damn times, so I won't bore you too much with this, but I do want to remind myself that the topside Krown band on the monthly is still resting right above 40,000 bucks, and on the bi-monthly right below 40,000 bucks. And as we've seen over the history of Bitcoin, every time, literally 100% of the time that Bitcoin has closed a monthly dildo above the topside Krown band, it has always, at the very least, come back down to test the topside Krown band. And so that can happen one of two ways. Either we literally come back down to those levels, around the $40,000 level, maybe a little bit lower than that, and test it that way, or Bitcoin gets so damn green this month that it naturally pulls it up. That would probably happen at a price point somewhere a little bit above 60,000 bucks. It's possible, yes, but is it looking like the most likely thing to happen right now? Maybe not necessarily. But there are two ways for that to happen. And for something that does have a 100% hit rate, historically speaking, I do think that that is very much relevant. And we have several iterations here too, I should mention as well. And again, this is also consistent on the bi-monthly, but I won't show it right now because I don't want to waste your time, right? And realistically, we've been looking at the same damn thing for the last couple of weeks here. So with that in mind, looking at CMEs, I'm curious if there's anything that we see here that's not present on spot price action. And not really. These charts are actually very much within concert with each other. Now, I would be cognizant of this because Bitcoin is seeing lower term time frame momentum oscillators get pretty damn low there. We see 4-hour, 3-hour, bi-hourly, and hourly all kind of in their critical zone, and actually a little bit bifurcated as well, as only the 4 hours technically still down. So this likely does align with a little bit more sideways, probably a little more downside, and then maybe over the weekend we do play out the medium term timeframes, of which we do see a fresh cross to the downside on the 12-hour. We see the 2-day coming down as well. We see the 3-day coming down as well. And so I would be looking for bounces, anywhere around $45,000 on the shorter term timeframes. If it happens over the weekend that Bitcoin does get down to the low $40,000 region, I'd look at that as a major opportunity as well. I'm not necessarily bearish on the long term on Bitcoin, as we have been going over in the daily live streams. And I won't go over the full explanation on that one here too. I'll probably upload a video this weekend over, that goes over like a bunch of different ways that you can kind of judge the next market cycle, macro cycle top, that is, not just market cycle, but macro cycle top. And we actually don't see any of, and we actually go through examples, in that video, and you're not going to see anything that is present there that is indicative of that, at least for now. That is. And this video obviously being recorded in the 5th day of March, just for reference. So with that in mind, I'm curious if there's anything else that I should be covering here. What would I be using as levels? Pretty much the same levels as before. Blue box territory between 44,000 and 45,000. Actually, that's more like 44,400 to 45,000 bucks. So that would imply that a 4-hour closure below 44,400 would denote a breakdown continuation to that lower $40,000 target, which, by the way, the 377 exponential moving average is now right around that $40,000 region. I think that is worth mentioning. And then, of course, to the upside, there's not really a whole hell of a lot to be looking at in the more immediate future. I'm actually very hesitant to even use a short-term time frame range because I just don't think it's going to be working all that well here. I'd actually be using this last lower high at about 51,500-ish region as a bit of a bias changer for the medium-term timeframes, meaning that as long as Bitcoin's below there, I do look at this as more or less a sideways and slightly down market. If Bitcoin does take this level back onto the upside, that's once again pressure onto the upside, of which I would look for a quick test towards around 54 to 55,000 bucks. Technically speaking, I do think that Bitcoin would just end up being bullish after that, very likely testing the prior all-time high and maybe even beyond. But I would be using this as your next sort of continuation point for a daily trending indication once again, meaning that if Bitcoin can close a daily specifically, no other time frame, above 54,000 bucks, if you put a gun to my head and said, Krown, use a 4-hour, I'd say 55,000 bucks, so $1,000 higher than that, then I would be looking for another retest of the $58,000 high. And at that point, very likely Bitcoin does, play out a short-term pullback from there, but ultimately does gun for the next major fib target on our charts right here at around the $62,000 level, which, by the way, these actually in hindsight have been working incredibly well. You see that we put in the $58,000 high right around the 2.618. We've been accumulating below around this region right here and this region right here. Quite nice. So with all of that said, and with Michael Saylor buying some more, I do think that is important to say that we are still seeing signs of accumulation within this region, but it can still, take its time going sideways and down. And matching it up with the Dixie chart, I do think that it is a time to be, well, it's time to be bored, really. Despite all of the clickbait YouTube title, YouTube bullshit headlines, at the end of the day, Bitcoin's more or less sideways here and probably gonna be boring people. The good news is that we have big ranges. I mean, this is a what, $6,000 range for the medium term timeframes. I think there's plenty of opportunity there, but unless Bitcoin moves 10,000 bucks, well, I think people just get bored in general. So fair enough. With that said, I think this is a good place to leave off this video. I want to wish you well once again. Is there anything else that I should be talking about here? I feel like I should give a short-term time frame range, but I don't think that they're going to work right here. If I did have to do one, I'd say 48.5, but I don't think that that's going to work in this case. I'd still be sticking with 51.5 to the upside versus about 45 to the downside for actually changing around this whole range. And then we'll come back to it next week, most likely. And at that point, perhaps we could see an actual break. But for now, sideways is the name of the game, in my opinion. And with that said, I would like to wish you the best and the happiest. Take care, and until next time.